So shall we start? So welcome, it's a bit unusual. This is my first proper flower arranging class using Zoom. So obviously you're used to seeing me teaching live, and I do teach on Facebook and do a lot of YouTube videos as well. So I'm going to be recording this. I will edit it to take out I'm going to edit the beginning and the end. And then I've got several people on my list who've expressed an interest in looking at the recording. So it's going to be a bit trial and error. If it all goes horribly wrong, I'll just be putting this one down to experience and thinking of doing something else. The access to the class is free, but I have, if you feel that you'd like to make a donation towards the costs that are involved, you've all had the email with my PayPal details. So thank you to those of you who've made a small contribution towards today's costs. So I'm going to try and be quite clever. We've only got 40 minutes. If we find that this format works really well, I can upgrade my membership to Zoom and we can have a longer class. But at the moment, it's restricted to 40 minutes. So we will whiz along a little bit. And also I have pre-filmed a short segment because I want to show you a technique for making chicken wire, homemade chicken wire. So we're going to be making something like this. And you can see if I did that now live on the film, I don't think you would really see what I was doing. You can't see it in front of me, but you can see it a bit better over there. So if I run through the materials we're going to be using first of all, I have always got my trusty pair of scissors. And these ones are really good. They're the ones made by Oasis, and they have this sort of biting piece here. I'm not sure whether you can see that or not. That's really good for cutting wire. I have got a packet of wires as well. These are 0.90 floristry wires. And I will, in the email I send out the recording, I will give you links to everything. So if you want to make, these ones don't have any plastic coating on, they're just the bare metal. And you'll see at the end of the video I filmed that my hands just get really, really dirty. And in fact, I've still got the wound as well from when I pierced myself with the wire. So do take care. Flower arranging sounds all lovely and airy-fairy, but actually sometimes it's really hard work on your hands and your hands do get really dirty. I have got some optional pot tape in case my wire mesh doesn't fit snugly on my dish. I've got some pot tape, so you'll be used to seeing this if you're used to using flower foam. So that's just there as an optional extra. I've also got on hand a pair of pliers with a wire cutter section. I quite like these. They're not quite needle nose pliers, but they have got a pointy bit because I have, I'm going to finish off the edge of my mesh frame in order, again, I don't get snagged on it. And then the pièce de résistance is my container. So this is what is called a windowsill vase or a mantelpiece vase. And like lots of my containers, I pick them up from charity shops and junk shops. This one, hold your breath, only cost me £1 because it's got a chip. I don't even think you can see this chip there. It's got a chip down here and it's been made in Birmingham, so British made. Obviously, you might not have a container like this and that doesn't matter at all. But it will give you, I do love using these, and when we're all allowed to go back shopping, you can have a look in charity shops to see what you've got. But if you wanted a substitute, I've got a baking loaf tin, which would work just as well. Or if you had a gravy boat or something like that. So we're thinking longish and lowish, because in the future weeks, I'm going to do different shapes for you. So that's why I'm concentrating on just the one style of container. I'm going to, actually, as I did that, this is my mum and dad's old container, and they didn't have a dishwasher, so I've been putting it through my dishwasher, and now it's shedding bits of baked on cooking from the last 50 years. So I need to have a good old tidy up of my work surface. I'm going to share a screen with you, so bear with me because I am still practicing with my technology. I'm going to share a screen, and I'm going to bring up, oh, can you see that? A PowerPoint presentation. So I thought, I am just going to see if I can move you out of the way a little bit. That this is week 1 of a 3-week course of eco or environmentally friendly flower arranging. So we're trying to do foam-free arrangements, and week 1 is we're going to be making our own chicken wire. So foam-free flowers are a growing trend. We seem to be going back to the old ways, the old-fashioned ways of flower arranging. And part of that is there's a whole movement about not using flower foam anymore because it's a byproduct of the petrochemical industry. It is in fact a single-use plastic, so it's really doesn't really fit with the increased environmental awareness that we've got. And the issue then is, how do we arrange our flowers creatively without using flower foam? Because using flower foam, you can put your flowers in at all different angles. You know, you could have flowers in upside down. And of course, when you're just arranging water, you are slightly restricted. So it's all about thinking, we're going to be environmentally friendly by not using the plastic flower foam, but what techniques and mechanics do we need to hold our flowers in place? So we're going to be making this DIY wire mesh, this chicken wire. So it means it will support your flowers and they won't flop apart. You know, if you do that traditional cut and plonk of your supermarket flowers into a vase, if your vase has got quite an open mouth, they just spill everywhere. So by having this mesh that you are capable of holding your flowers more or less where you want them to be held. And of course, your flowers are always in water. They will take up water much better in actual physical water than they will in flower foam. You can make this mesh to whatever size container you've got, whether that be small or large. And if you're careful, it's reusable. And if you're a bit heavy-handed and you want to roll it up in a ball and throw it away, it is recyclable because we are using wires and you can put that in a recycling bin. So I will confirm what arrangements you want in the follow-up email, but I'm using 0.90 wires or possibly a finer gauge wire you can get away with, which is the 0.71 wire. You need to go reasonably strong with your wires. So those are the wire gauges I'm talking about. If you go any finer, you may find that the structure just doesn't hold up and it gets bent out of shape and it doesn't hold your flowers. You could go with a much thicker wire, but again, you might find that really hard work on your hands. Wire cutters are optional. I've talked about the floristry scissors with their special wire cutting teeth, and you can go freeform. So I'm going to make quite a structured grid, but it is quite fun doing all this twisting. And if you want to go off and create something that is just really quite avant-garde and you actually want to hang the wire work on your wall, I think you'll really enjoy the project. And then the last point there is about the gauge of your mesh. That just means how big your holes are. You need to make sure you're making a mesh with reasonably big holes in order to get your flowers through. If you make it too small, you'll have real trouble getting your flowers through. So start on the larger size to begin with. Now, I'm hoping here that this will bring up a video. Not quite sure about that. Let's stop there. I'm going to switch screens. I will come out of that screen and say hello again. And then I'm going to share my next screen, which is my YouTube. Ooh. So if I play, I'm hoping you can hear that.
Over the other.
So we're taking two wires and we're crossing them together.
And twist them in place 3 or 4 times. I'm going to repeat that a few more times until I've got the length of the piece of mesh that I want.
So I will show you how to do this when I'm back in front of you, but I wanted you to see this technique because I don't think you're going to see it particularly clearly when I talk to you.
So I've made up dirty my fingers are starting to get already. So I've wired up, twisted up 6 pieces of wire so far. If I lay those out, you'll be able to see them, and then you can start to imagine what the mesh is going to look like. So at this stage, it's going to get quite complicated because we're working with more than 2 wires at a time. I'm going to try and make it easier by just having
oops,
2 sets of wires, and you can see here where they cross is going to be the next place for my next twist. And then this becomes my next wire. Lay the next one over the top. and twist again. Then using this wire, add in the next group of wires, and where they cross, twist.
So you can see it's quite a simple technique. You just need to be thinking about pairs of wires all the time.
So every piece of wire is joined to every other piece of wire. So I've got my initial twists along here, and then my second row of twists along here. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and start twisting again. So the first two wires are twist together, and then the next group, and you can see how the mesh is starting to develop.
So I'm creating a bit like a honeycomb effect. If you think of your pairs of wires, and then the next row I miss the first wire.
Next two unattached wires.
And then when I get to the third row, I start at the beginning again. So it's sort of, you miss one every other row, and then you weave it back in on the next row, which sounds complicated, but it is easier when you're working on it.
And then the next two wires, and continue on to reach the end of that row. Then start back at the beginning again. So this time I'm going to leave this wire here and take these two.
So I'm going to stop that there and come back to you and plug my microphone back in. So I will show you. Oh, I think that's okay. It's me talking. I heard myself talking over myself there. So what you do is to take two wires and you twist them together, and it's going to be quite difficult. You just need to be aware it's going to be quite difficult in your hands. So if you find difficulty, this might be something to do with a friend. So I'm doing that and effectively, creating a bit of a tuning fork. So I won't repeat the whole video again, but this is the technique, and I know it's just quite difficult to see when I am, the film quality isn't quite so good. So I've got two tuning forks there, and then where they cross over is where I would do the second twist. So it is a lot of twisting, but it is quite good fun. And I've done it, so you sort of see that starting to shape up, and then you would be twisting those two together and those two together. So I say the advice I've got for you is you need to decide how many of those pairs of twists to produce. So you need to see how long your vase is and sort of lay out your pairs across the vase just to have a look. It's really difficult if you make a bit of mesh and then you decide that it's not wide enough. It's quite tricky to add in extra wires, because you sort of cast off on that end where you sometimes leave that end wire on its own. So I would take the time just to measure out where you're going to go. I will let you have the full copy of that video later, because I then show you what happens when you run out of length coming this way, and you may need to attach more wires on. So if I show you what I've got here, that is what the video ended up showing you. It's not perfect, it's not actually chicken wire, but it has the spaces to arrange your flowers in. And I've left it so it's actually got all these snaggy ends, which isn't a good idea to leave. Not only do you risk scratching your vase, damaging your flowers, but you're going to hurt yourself as well. And what I've ended up doing is this. Look, I'm on my own little prison there. So you can see these chunky bits here. They are where I added in extra length. So I had the width right by measuring out how many pairs of wires I needed, but I needed to add in extra length so I could continue twisting. And then you can see with these little bits at the end, I've curled them off to make it into a decorative detail, and that is where my pliers came in, that I bent over the wires and curled them round. So you've got it like that, and then I twisted it a little bit. So it's a combination of being functional, but also it's slightly decorative as well. So once you've got your mesh done, I mean, it does look rather lovely. You can imagine, if I was at all being avant-garde and hadn't been quite so regular with my grid pattern, I could be doing something quite organic and spontaneous and making something really, really beautiful. Now I'm going to bring my flowers on next, so I'm going to push the screen away and hope I don't knock over my water, which I did just before I pressed the live button. So hopefully if I do that, you'll still be able to see me, and I can start to arrange. So this will tidy up a little bit. That one. So bringing my container back in place, I'm going to rest my piece of wire over the top. If you're just resting on the top, it's not going to hold. So what I'm actually going to do is shape it slightly around the vase. So I'm going to push it down a little bit, so it starts to stand up. I've got like a little fence of wire, and then I'm going to bend that wire over. Like that, and then round to the other side. Now this is part of the reason why I finished off with this decorative twist, because you can then decide whether you want this part of your mechanics to show. You may decide that you want to show off how you've made your arrangement. You've skillfully made your chicken wire, you might as well show it off. Or you might want to crunch it up again and twist back, or make sure when you add your greenery and your flowers that you're covering this. So your choice there of what you want to do. I quite like the way it was showing off and just makes it look a bit more personal. Now, if you felt that that wasn't holding sufficiently well, you could use your pot tape and thread that through over the top. So it just depends. Again, it's not a competition. We're trying to arrange flowers without using flower foam. Yes, the tape is plastic, but it's not a competition to see how little thing, how truly eco and reusable you can be. A lot of it is practice, so you do what you feel comfortable with. You're making small steps to becoming more environmentally aware about your mechanics. You're not using flower foam, you're using the metal grid that can be recycled. So don't beat yourself up. If you feel you need, for your added security, to put a piece of tape across to hold your mesh in place, well, you can go ahead and do that. And then the only downside is that you've got a whacking great big line across there. So now you've got to be even more careful when you place your flowers that you're covering up that bit there. So you may decide anyway, for aesthetic looks, you don't particularly like it, but that is an option. You could grip it in place a couple of times. And in fact, I've not managed to grip it there. I'm going to go underneath the wire to make sure it does hold. Now, I'm not going to put water in my flowers at the moment as I arrange them, because I've already spilt water all over my computer. So please, at this stage, fill up your container with water. Your flowers, of course, need fresh water to survive. So imagine I have just pulled some water in here. I'm then going to reach across to my greenery that I've picked out from the garden. Now, the difficulty we've got at the moment, of course, getting access to greenery because of our florist shops are closed. So I've been around my garden this morning. So I'm lucky that I've got quite an ordinary garden, and I think that I have managed to find things in my garden. It can be really tricky though, especially if you don't have a garden. So you, when you're doing your essential food shopping at the supermarket, you may need to be picking up a bunch of flowers in the supermarket and seeing whether you can pick the flowers up that seem to have a nice bit of greenery. So it'll be a matter of, we're making do at the moment. We're just trying to use what we can. So if I show you what I have picked, I have got some hellebores. These are notoriously difficult to work with. You need to pick them when their seed heads are really well developed. Can you see that there? It's got a nice plump seed head. perhaps I shouldn't tell you the names of these plants. Perhaps you should comment in the chat box. Do you know that one? No. So this is Arum pictometallicum. It's like a veined a plant, straight from the garden. Again, it's quite temperamental. It's just so soft-stemmed, as much as our spring flowers are. I then got around a bit of greenery. It did come out of a supermarket bunch, and I can't remember the name of that. And I have some ivy and some conifer and choicea, the little white flowers, but it absolutely whiffs. So if you don't like, and not in a nice way, it's an acquired smell. And then we have a Fatsia japonica growing in the garden. I just need to mute there. A Fatsia japonica in the garden, and because I'm growing it, I can choose what size leaves I want. So I've gone for different size leaves, but they're all quite small. Whereas when you buy from the florist, they're all, you know, you can buy a small, medium or large, but they are quite large. And some more ivy trails and some, again, I won't tell you too quickly if you want to guess, but in my bucket, they are begonia leaves, sometimes called elephant ears. So the first job I like to do with all my arranging is to, now you can't see what I'm doing. I like to sort of sketch out in greenery where we're going and then add in the flowers afterwards. And I often find as well, if you've been careful with your selection of flowers and, well, selection of greenery, that quite often you might feel you don't actually need any flowers because you want to be looking at your greenery in terms of colour form and texture. So not all greenery is green. I've showed you some marbled greenery with the leaves. I've shown my helleborgs are flowers, but there's a pink tinge to it. They've got different shapes and different textures, so it's always really good to put them together. So don't feel that, oh, I can't do this project because I haven't got any flowers. Have a look and see what you've got round about. And you may find this time of the year, we've had quite high winds at the weekend, silver birch branches might be really helpful, or if you've got a bit of blossom that's growing, you know, just a random twig going up. So I think the watchword is, it doesn't matter. What you're doing is absorbing yourself in a creative activity and forgetting about the rest of the world for the moment. I'm going to have to crack on because we're running out of time. So I would always recut my stems, and then I like to group my flowers around, and I am layering them in. So I like to use one bit of green at once so I don't get too muddled up. So I've put in my Fatsia on one corner and then cutting to size on the other, so I might have a bit of a trailing of the Arum pictum, grouping on the edges, and you can see how it's starting to break the edge of the bowl, so you can't quite see over here that the that metal edge is quite so obvious. And perhaps I have had a little bit of green over there. I quite like the way this is sort of creating a little shelf, so it is doing a really good job of hiding those mechanics. So perhaps if I can just see a glimpse of the wire, it's not going to matter so much. And then start to come in with a bit of body. So with my choicea, it's branched, so I can come in with that. And all I'm doing, taking off any leaves that might sit inside the vase, and you don't want them sitting in the water line. I'm going to make a little trail of these, perhaps going diagonally across. And the more flowers you add in, the more they will start to support themselves. I'm sure you found that if you're arranging flowers in a vase of water, that to begin with, everything just sort of flops, but you can eventually get a lovely structure that you're creating with the stems as well. Thinking about the scale of things as well, I picked these two leaves. They're not huge, but I just think perhaps this one is going to look too big in relation to everything else. So I'm going to use that for something else. I could come in with a little bit of a leafage down there. I know perhaps if it's too flat, this is quite nice, sort of roll up like a old-fashioned hair roller, so you can change the shape of it a little bit. And I'm doing this kind of looking in the mirror as I arrange. So when you're arranging, it's to be turning round all the time and making sure it's looking good on all the angles. What I did want to put in was this piece of ivy that's growing over our garden shed. It's probably a bit too long, but if I cut it somewhere that feels natural, and then that will make a good overspill as well. I might put it over this beginner leaf because it'll just sort of break the balance a little bit. So if I just try and move that decluttering, you can see it's just an informal shape. I'm not trying to make it even on each side. In fact, I'm ending up with something a little bit asymmetrical. And it's just a few clippings. There's probably 10 stems from the garden. So although I thought, you can see on the edge there, some supermarket flowers, I'm wondering actually whether I need them in there. Perhaps I should showcase my hellebores and keep them on slightly longer stems so they're sort of bouncing up above the height of the container. And again, it's making everything a little bit bigger. So it's not what you put in your arrangement, it's how you do it. And there's elements of coming up taller that you're enclosing this area of space. And it's just making everything look really bigger and more exuberant. So I'm running out of time, ladies. So what I'm going to do is I will video myself doing this again. And I will send you the complete video. But what I will try and do, if you want to take yourselves all off mute, I can unmute some of you. If you want to ask me questions, I've recorded the meeting. I will send you out the recording. I will send you out the video to make the mesh. I will take this apart and remake it and send you the video for that. And I'll also send you the buy list. So you can recreate it at home. And then perhaps if you'd like to email me photographs, I can share with people or put them on my Facebook group. So ladies, I'm going to have to call it there now. I think we're on 39 minutes, so I don't quite know what happens at 40. Thank you. So I will follow up. I won't promise today, but in the next couple of days, you'll get another email from me and just, wrapping everything up. And it'll be same place, same time next week with another arrangement, this time in a taller urn with more of a bubble of chicken wire.